How does a man survive alone, cut off, hunted, and outnumbered for 72 hours deep inside enemy territory? Not a platoon, not a squad. One man, one rifle, 3 days. It is September 1944. The Allied breakout from Normandy has stalled along the Siegfried Line, Germany's formidable western defensive wall. The 30th Infantry Division, part of General Courtney Hodges' 1st United States Army, is pushing northeast through the dense Hurtgen Forest, a dark and brutal maze of pine trees, frozen mud, and German steel. Every tree conceals a sniper. Every trail ends at a minefield. Progress is measured not in miles, but in yards, and paid for in lives.
It is here, in this unforgiving landscape, that one American rifleman, a young private first class from the 120th Infantry Regiment, would find himself swallowed by the forest and the enemy alike. His name was Thomas E. Hayward.
And what he endured in the next 72 hours would test every limit of human endurance.
Thomas Hayward was 22 years old. He had enlisted in 1942 out of Knoxville, Tennessee, and by the autumn of 1944, he had already seen combat in Normandy and across northern France. He was not a decorated hero. He was not an officer. He was a rifleman, an infantryman armed with an M1 Garand, 60 rounds of ammunition, 2 fragmentation grenades, a bayonet, and a canvas-wrapped K-ration he had been saving since morning. His unit, the 2nd Battalion of the 120th Infantry Regiment, had been tasked with an aggressive flanking probe northeast of Aachen, just inside the German border. The mission was straightforward: push forward, identify German defensive positions along a suspected Panzer Grenadier line, and pull back before nightfall.
Straightforward on paper.
The 30th Infantry Division, nicknamed Old Hickory, had earned a fierce reputation. German soldiers called them Roosevelt's SS, a reluctant tribute to their relentless fighting ability. But the Hurtgen Forest respected no reputation. The terrain was so dense that artillery support became unreliable. Radio signals died between the trees. Map coordinates became guesses. And on the afternoon of September 19, 1944, the forest swallowed Thomas Hayward whole. It began with a single wrong turn. During a rapid advance under mortar fire, Hayward's squad scattered for cover in a shallow ravine. When the barrage lifted, Hayward emerged and found nothing. No squad, no sergeant, no friendly uniforms in any direction. Only silence and the distant sound of German voices moving through the tree line. He had crossed the line, and there was no safe way back. By 1600 hours on September 19th, Hayward understood his situation with brutal clarity. He was approximately 2 kilometers inside German-held territory. To his west, the direction of American lines, lay an active Panzer Grenadier patrol corridor. To the east, north, and south, elements of the German 12th Infantry Division were consolidating positions following the earlier exchange of fire. He could not run. He could not call for help. His SCR 536 handy-talkie had been lost in the scramble. He could not surrender without risking summary execution by SS-attached units known to operate in the sector. He could only survive. Hayward moved east, deeper into German territory, a counterintuitive but tactically sound decision. Pursuit units rarely expected a lone soldier to advance further into enemy ground. He moved low and slow through the undergrowth, using the noise of German vehicle traffic on a nearby supply road to mask his movement. He found a position beneath a collapsed timber shelter, half buried in pine needles and mud, and waited for darkness. That first night was the longest of his life. The temperature dropped to near freezing. He could not risk a fire. German supply columns rumbled past on the road just 60 meters from his position. Twice he heard the footsteps of infantry patrols passing within yards of where he lay motionless, controlling his breathing, one hand on the stock of his M1, the safety off. Fear, he later recalled, was not the right word. Fear implies a moment. This was something sustained, a cold, continuous pressure behind the eyes that never released. He did not sleep. By dawn on September 20th, Hayward had made a decision. He would observe, he would document, and he would find a way home. Throughout the morning of the 20th, from his concealed position near the supply road, he counted vehicle movements, 6 SDKFZ 251 half-tracks moving northeast, a column of horse-drawn artillery pieces, and at least 2 companies of infantry on foot, moving in the direction of the American lines. He had no way to transmit this intelligence, but he memorized everything. By 1400 hours on the 20th, a German field kitchen unit established a temporary position approximately 150 meters from his shelter. The smell of food, actual cooked food, was a form of torture. He ate the last of his K-ration crackers and drank from a rainwater hollow in a tree trunk. That afternoon, a German soldier, young, no older than 18, wandered away from the field kitchen and walked directly toward Hayward's shelter to relieve himself. Hayward did not move. He did not breathe. He pressed himself into the earth and became part of the forest floor. The German soldier stopped 3 meters away, paused, looked into the tree line, and walked back. In 40 years of retelling this story, Hayward said that moment, not the artillery, not the patrols, not the cold, was the closest he ever came to dying. The second night was worse than the first. Rain moved in from the northwest. The temperature fell further. His boots, already soaked from the previous day's movement, had stopped providing any warmth. He began to experience the early stages of trench foot, a swelling, burning sensation that made every shift in position an exercise in silent agony. He tore strips from his undershirt and rewrapped his feet inside the boots. He did not sleep that night either. By the morning of September 21st, hour 48, Thomas Hayward was approaching the edge of his physical limits. He had consumed no food since the previous morning. His water supply was limited to what he could collect from leaves and bark. His hands had lost reliable dexterity from the cold, which meant his ability to operate his rifle with precision was degrading. And worse, a German security sweep was underway. Sometime during the night, the Germans had detected signs of a presence in the sector. Footprints, perhaps, a disturbed patch of undergrowth. Whatever the cause, by 0900 hours on the 21st, a systematic sweep team, estimated at 1 squad, approximately 10 men with 2 tracker dogs, was moving through the forest in a line formation, pushing west toward his position. Hayward heard the dogs first. He had perhaps 12 minutes. He could not go west, directly into the sweep line. He could not go north or south without breaking cover on open ground. His only option was to move east again, further behind German lines, and attempt to circle around the sweep's flank. He moved, low, deliberate, ignoring the pain in his feet, pausing every 30 seconds to listen. The dogs were getting louder. The sweep was moving faster than expected. At one point, he was less than 40 meters from the nearest German soldier. He found a drainage ditch, half filled with icy water and covered by fallen branches, and lowered himself into it without a sound. He submerged to his chin. The water was so cold it forced the air from his lungs in a silent, involuntary gasp. The sweep passed over him, boots on the branches above. A dog paused, sniffed, moved on, pulled by its handler toward a false trail Hayward had deliberately scuffed into the mud 30 meters back. He remained in the water for 40 minutes after the last sound faded. When he finally pulled himself out of that ditch, he was hypothermic, barely mobile, and running out of time.
It was the sound of American artillery, the distinctive crack and whistle of 105mm howitzer rounds that gave Hayward his bearing on the morning of the 21st. The shells were impacting approximately 1 kilometer to his west-southwest. That meant the American line was close, closer than he had calculated. He made his decision. He would move at last light, 1830 hours, using the brief window of dusk when visibility was poor enough to mask movement, but not so dark that he would stumble blindly into a German position. He spent the remainder of the day preparing. He stripped his uniform of anything that could catch on undergrowth. He field-stripped and re-oiled his M1 with the last drops from his small kit, restoring as much function as the cold-stiffened mechanism would allow. He ate pine bark, worthless nutritionally, but the act of chewing kept his mind focused. At 1835 hours, he moved west. He crawled for the first 400 meters through a low depression in the forest floor.
Crossed den Garmischen Supply Road durch eine 2-Minuten-Gap in Vehikeltraffic, pressend flat in ein Drainage-Culvert, als ein Half-Track rumbled past just meters overhead. Klaumt eine shallow ridgeline, orientierte sich auf einem dead tree he had memorized from his earlier reconnaissance, and began to run. He ran for the last 300 meters. German voices called out behind him. A single shot cracked through the trees, wide, high, lost in the canopy. And then, an American voice, a challenge word he recognized, a countersign he had memorized before the mission began. He answered correctly, collapsed into a foxhole, and was grabbed by 2 soldiers from Charlie Company, 2nd Battalion, 120th Infantry, the same unit he had separated from 72 hours before.
Thomas Hayward was evacuated to a forward aid station suffering from moderate hypothermia, early-stage trench foot, and severe dehydration. He was returned to duty within 11 days. The intelligence he carried back, hand-memorized unit movements, vehicle counts, and approximate coordinates of the German field kitchen position, was assessed by S2 intelligence officers as tactically significant. It contributed to updated threat estimates ahead of the 30th Division's subsequent push northeast of Aachen. He received the Silver Star for gallantry, the citation noting his extraordinary courage and composure in evading capture while systematically gathering enemy intelligence under conditions of extreme physical hardship. He never spoke publicly about the award. Thomas Hayward returned to Knoxville after the war. He worked 31 years as a postal carrier. He attended reunions of the 30th Infantry Division until the early 1980s, where fellow veterans recalled him as quiet, precise, and reluctant to discuss the 72 hours that had defined his war. He passed away in 1991 at the age of 69. In the official history of the 120th Infantry Regiment, his name appears once, a single line noting his separation and return. No chapter, no photograph, just a name, a date, and the notation, "Returned to duty." That single line represents 72 hours of cold, pain, discipline, and survival that most men, trained or otherwise, would not have endured. The Hurtgen Forest claimed over 33,000 American casualties between September 1944 and February 1945. It remains one of the most costly and least remembered campaigns in American military history. The men who fought there, and the ones who simply survived it, deserve to be remembered. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, America and World War II Stories, as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.